glory of God-sized stories.
Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. This week, I have Marty. Marty, tell us about yourself.
Well, I became a Christian when I was a teenager. I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. Was in the ministry of Young Life and became a Christian at a Christian camp at age 15. Went to college, was involved in what is now called Cru. And I actually ended up working on staff with Cru for a number of years after college. Went to seminary at Trinity in Deerfield, which is what brought me to this area. Got the PhD bug and did a doctorate in Reformation history at Wisconsin-Madison.
Oh.
And then came back here. I taught for a year at University of Iowa in the history department, and then I got a job at Trinity. I've been what's called an affiliate or part-time professor at Trinity for a long time, for decades, mostly in the area of church history, a little bit of theology. My regular job, which doesn't have anything to do with history or Campus Crusade or anything else, I work as a vice president at a commercial bank. I specialize in loans for condominium associations all over the Midwest. So I've been doing that for quite a while. I've been with this bank. This is my second stint with this bank. So 4 years, and then this has been 4 more years. So 8 years total with this company.
So you've really been kind of just all over, doing all sorts of things, just a man of many talents.
Many talents, yes. Yes. I work at home, which is very nice. But the big event in my life, I got married in 1987, and in January of 2014, my wife, Barbara, passed away. Suddenly, though she had been sick for a very long time, it was something that we just didn't expect. So it radically transformed my life. Everything changed when that happened. And so it's been 6.5 years now, trying to redefine myself, redefine what God's will is for my life, and then trying to move forward.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Like, you've been now in this season of like almost like a renaissance. This new powerful season. Yeah,
it wasn't always like that. When she first died, I initially lost a lot of weight because I couldn't eat anything. I lost 20 pounds within like 3 weeks, which is not a good way to lose weight.
No, it is not.
And I kept it off for a while, and then I got to be a giant again, and I look at some of these pictures, and they just make me shake my head. My daughter, Bonnie, is a dietitian.
Oh.
And people are asking me, if your daughter's a dietitian, how come you're so fat? You know, guys are like that. Guys don't mince words. They just tell you the truth. And I didn't have an excuse. So I hired my daughter. I actually paid her.
Hey?
And I lost 40 pounds. It took me a year.
Oh, wow.
And then
that's a healthy way to do it.
It was like around a pound a week.
That's good. It's good progress.
But I changed everything in terms of what I ate. All my patterns were just different. And after I lost the weight, she says, "Dad, you look better, but you're still pretty flabby." So she took me to this gym that has classes. It's called Orange Theory Fitness.
Oh, yeah. And
I don't think I was going to survive the first time. And my son Billy came with me, and he wasn't doing any better. So I started going once a week to that, and then twice a week, and then I just started going as many times as I could go.
Yeah.
I can't go 7 days a week. That's just too much for my body.
Yeah.
But I probably average 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
So I was able to, to improve how I felt and how I looked and how I felt about myself. And so I thought that was a big thing for me, was just transforming my physical well-being between losing weight and getting in shape.
That can have such a powerful effect on our mind on top of it.
It affects everything that you do. But in this, at the same time, I was determined to change some other things too. And I had some long-term goals that I wanted to fulfill. As an academic, I wanted to do some writing. And I knew I wanted to write, I just needed time to write it. But when you're not married, it's amazing how much time you have.
I'm sure.
That you didn't have before. And so I've written a few books since then, or edited or contributed to books. And I've been pretty active there and teaching. The other thing I've been doing is getting on a lot of boards. Just trying to use some of my experience for the Lord's work. So I'm on the board at Trinity International. I've been on the board. Actually, I started the board a month after Barb died, which was a crazy time. I'm on the board of a couple of missions organizations. And I'm president of the fire district up here. That's another thing that just kind of fell in my lap. So I'm the king of 40-minute meetings. We don't need to meet for a long time. And I'm the president, so I can set the meetings.
Exactly.
When we're done, we're done.
Bring the gavel down.
So, I've been doing a lot of those things. I joined a small group at church. I wasn't in a small group before. I go to Village Church of Gurnee, and that's been a real joy for me. It's a strange group of 6 couples and me. So they always want to know.
Yeah.
What I'm up to.
Yeah, how's Marty doing? What's he doing?
And
check in with Marty.
They pray for me, and it's amazing, praying for God to bring someone in your life. And right now, I have a situation where I have a long-distance relationship, which is I've never done before. It was a COVID girlfriend who works at a big church down in West Palm Beach, Florida. So it's a good relationship having a Christian girl that really can encourage you.
I bet.
It's just it's amazing. Just amazing. So this is somewhat new. This has been since COVID hit.
There's always something new to learn.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of COVID marriages that have developed.
I would believe it. Yeah.
And COVID relationships. So I'm in that group. So. Any prayers that any listeners can have for me that I continue to do the right thing here. But, it's amazing what God brings in your life in terms of opportunities to serve, to minister to others. And I've had some unique experiences in my life that have given me a different perspective than I thought I would have had at any other time.
Let's circle back real quick, talk about the writing again. So you said a bunch of books. What are, for our listeners' sake, what kind of books? What, or maybe titles of a few of them or so? Yeah,
I've got a 3-volume series, and 2 of the volumes are out on the theology of the French Reformed churches. After the Reformation in France, the Protestants of France were called the Huguenots, and they were a small minority. In the 16th century, there were religious wars. In the 17th century, they had protection from the crown under what was called the Edict of Nantes, where they had legal authority to exist. But in 1685, the king, Louis XIV, revoked it. And in the period after 1685, most of them had to leave the country. So one of the books on this is on the 16th century, one's on the 17th century, and the third one's on the 18th century. I did them in a strange order. I started in the middle, then went to the later period, and the one I'm working on now is the 16th century. And it's about halfway through. I edit the book, but I also contribute to it. So I put the project together, and I'm able to get some really good scholars, some internationally known scholars to contribute, which is really an honor. I get to edit a famous person's essay, and project moves more quickly that way. If I had to write the whole thing, I mean, I have a regular job.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
and 1,000 other.
I don't think I could. It would take me 10 years to write it, and I can put it together in a year or two this way.
Oh, sure.
So, and it's by getting the world's best experts together. And I write, 2 or 3 or 4 chapters out of maybe 15 in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But those are fun. I did a book. This just kind of fell in my lap. I run the Reformation section of what's called the Evangelical Theological Society. And at the annual conference, I put a session together on a very famous synod, which is an ecclesiastical meeting in the Netherlands called the Synod of Dort. And the reason I put together the Synod of Dort it was 1618 to 1619. And so the conference was in 1619. So it was the 400th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't have enough papers to put the book together. So there was a paper at another school on the same topic. So I was able to solicit those papers. And I have a friend who's president of a seminary in Michigan. He's pretty well known in terms of in Protestant Calvinist circles. And we put the book together and we got it out. It was very exciting. It came out very quickly. So I thought it was a good idea. It turned out really well. And it came together, it was in and out in less than a year.
Wow.
So that's pretty quick. Books it's not like writing a newspaper article or magazine. These things take forever to come out.
I've been just so fascinated, the Lord's blessed me the most during this, COVID era of just with the free time I've had. I've read more in the last 6 months than I think I have the last 6 years because I have all this time. So I've just been more fascinated even with the idea of books and them getting made. So it's it's an honor to sit to talk to someone who's they're thinking through those things,
Yeah. The nice thing about the French Reform stuff is that there's a lot of rich theology. Like one of the essays that I wrote was in a period where most of the Protestants were kicked out of the country. So you got the whole exile story. And they're writing, this professor, he's actually a pastor professor, he's writing back to his former congregation that's still in France. And a lot of them are under pressure to convert or to leave their faith. And he's counseling them to remain firm. And it's the essay is about a series of letters that he wrote. And some of them he's chastising them, some of them he's pleading with them. But it's pretty rich. Another essay in that book that I put together, I called The Theology of Comfort, where he's comforting, this is a different theologian, he's comforting his former church on how to trust God in the midst of persecution. And I think that's a good story for any period of time. I found it inspiring, just working on it. And then the third essay for that book was kind of interesting because the third theologian, pastor, believed that it was a sign of the end times. And so he actually came up with a date for the second coming of Christ. And guess what? He was wrong.
He was wrong.
Just like every other person throughout church history. I promise you, any person who's ever come up with a date has been wrong up to now. Up to now. But he actually came up with a date. So the article is about how he came up with the date and what his arguments were. So those were pretty fun to work on. So the one I'm working on right now is pretty technical. It's an essay on the Lord's Supper and how this particular theologian used Augustine, who died in 430, to support his arguments. So I got to go into Augustine and
a lot of background.
Yeah, it is. It's the good news is I'm 85% done with that one. When that project is done, I'm going to be so happy.
Well, that kind of leads me to another good question. What's next then? Because that sounds like it's a big project. And when that's done, what's next in the renaissance of Marty?
Well, you know what? If you're geared like I am, you always have 4 or 5 writing projects that you would love to do, and you pray that you live long enough to do The next one, I actually am going to write the whole book.
Oh.
And this one's going to be about a particular mega church outside of Paris in the 1600s. And who their pastors were, and what they wrote, and what the church went. They got burned down at one time. Actually got burned down twice.
Oh, wow. Because they were like so different, or because it just accidentally burned down?
Well, no, it wasn't an accident. These people, the Catholics and the Protestants didn't get along,
right,
in this period of time, and so the Protestants couldn't have a church within the environs of the city of Paris. So they had to go outside the city. So they found a place on the Seine River where they could actually take a boat to church Sunday morning. But you had to have money to have a boat.
Right.
Some people would get in their horse and carriage and go, people with wealth.
Yep.
But most of the people had to walk. And it was a few miles.
A long way.
And while they were walking or taking their boat to church, people would throw things at them and mock them on their way to services, because they typically would sing the Psalms while they were walking. So they'd be walking together singing the Psalms and be pelted with tomatoes and stuff like that while they were going to church. I think that's a fun story.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And this church had 15,000 members.
In 1600. Wow.
Yeah, it was a big church. And they burned it down twice. It's gone. They never rebuilt it.
Oh, really?
The church is gone. But they burned it down a couple of times. So that tells you the times have changed in terms of relationships between some of these different Christian groups that I don't think most people could imagine today, that it could be that nasty. In fact, one of the things I'm working on for some of my classes that I'm teaching is my girlfriend gave me this book called Peacemaker. And it's about conflict resolution. And I just figured out a way to integrate that in the seminary classes, because I think the biggest thing a pastor faces on a day-to-day basis is conflict. And how to resolve conflict in an amicable way. So they're going to have to read the book. And then they're going to have to write a paper on some situation in church history where Christians have been in conflict with each other, and then how they resolve that conflict, either in a positive or negative way. And then the student has to draw lessons about what they would do differently if they face that situation today. Because I think when these people get into ministry, I mean, it's really nice to know what Luther did in 1517. And that's really close to my heart.
Sure.
But
what happened after?
They're going to have to deal. They have to deal with, different people who aren't getting along or who disagree.
Sometimes over serious things, and sometimes over silly things too.
It's amazing. The problem with churches is that there are people in them. The old joke that if you find a perfect church, don't join it, you'll ruin it. But churches have people, and people are flawed. And that's just the way it is. And so if you're a pastor, I think you're going to have to do some refereeing, which nobody likes to do. I'd say for a pastor, that's the worst part of the job. But maybe it's the most important, or one of the most important that they have to do. So I think that's a good idea. I'm going to try this. I'm going to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear how it goes. So obviously you've gained and you've been very successful in this season. What's a piece of advice you would give the audience to just really jumpstart their life?
There's a few things. I remember when I was in college, going to these conferences, Christian conferences, I heard a speaker. He's still on staff, this guy, and I financially support this guy just because of that one speech he gave, and it was in the 70s.
Hey, good information lasts forever.
He quoted the old ad. He didn't even make this up. He's just quoting it. One life to live, 'twill soon be past. Only what is done for Christ will last. You look back, and he was right. He was right. So that changes your perspective on your life of what's really important, God, His Word, and people. And it sounds like just a trite expression, but there's a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you a perspective. And I think that if I take care of myself, it's not just good for me. It is good for me. But I'm going to have more energy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be more useful.
Mm-hmm.
Service. And I know a lot of people who struggle with that, especially when you get older. You know, the stuff you could eat in your 20s, you can't eat in your 40s and 50s. It's like you're attaching your dinner to your belly. And it just doesn't stop. And it's just harder to exercise. It's harder to eat right. And it's like the one vice that Christians have is when we get together, what do? We eat.
We eat. And we eat good food.
Yeah, it's all about the food. And trust me, my favorite food is pizza.
Oh, and that's nothing but bad.
I could eat pizza every day, all day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Well, you're from New York, so you have to like pizza.
Yeah, I like the Brooklyn pizza. They got so much grease, you got to fold it in half, and it will leak all over you.
Well, Marty, thank you so much for just sitting down with me now, for sharing all this with the audience, and just really taking advantage of your life. Like, you've really radicalized your life. You've really brought it all together and really want to make it useful for the rest of the time the Lord has you on this earth. And I've been blessed to mostly know you from afar and through other relations, like you referenced earlier, Billy, who's been on here in the past and is a dear friend of mine and made the music for you audience to hear at the beginning and the end of this. And it's just been a blessing to sit down now with you and just get to know you a little bit more and just be encouraged by you and just hear about a man that's on fire, you know, in a good way. Like the amount of things that the Lord does with you between the committees and the books and the teaching.
But I don't think it's all about do this, do that.
No, it's...
And that's what I have to be careful of, because if you get into the situation where you're just doing things for God, you're going to burn yourself out. And that's a red flag for me that I always have in the back of my head. Don't burn yourself out, because then everything will crash and burn.
I think that's just a wonderful little advice to just end with right there. And just watch yourself to not burn. It's like I've done that. I've made the mistake, and thanks for the reminder of that one. So thank you so much, Marty, and thank you, audience. As always, I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.